Adventure, excitement, a podcaster needs not these things. Welcome back to the Essential Films Podcast, a podcast devoted to the discussion of the greatest movies ever made or the essential films. I'm Adolfo Acosta, joined by my co-host, Mr. Mark Espinoza, and this isn't episode 5, but episode 23 of the podcast. And today we discuss the second film in the original Star Wars trilogy, The Empire Strikes Back. But before we get to that, how you doing, Mark?
Not much, man. How's it going, Adolfo?
This is going okay. Been going okay. We were here last time for our Superman episode, but doing some pretty decent numbers. Actually, it's becoming it's kind of climbing up on the popularity charts as far as the downloads that we've had and the views on YouTube. So I'm pretty happy with that episode. So hopefully, the Star Wars one will Empire one will do just as well.
Yeah, let's continue that streak. But I mean, we did unintentionally release this Superman episode like during the 80th anniversary of Superman, so I'm sure that helped a lot with a little bit of a boost in views too.
That's true. That was absolutely unintentional, but very serendipitous. Avengers Infinity War, which just came out this past weekend, and cheap plug, you can hear our spoiler review right now on the Force Perspective podcast, but you can find that on YouTube right now. But it's funny because that movie has been compared to our movie this week, The Empire Strikes Back, as being a darker version of the Marvel Universe because it has basically a grim ending. I don't want to get into spoilers for that movie. You can hear that podcast on your own to find out what's going on there or watch the film. But basically there's a dark ending, and anytime a movie in a series has like a darker ending or an ending where the bad guys win, it is often compared to The Empire Strikes Back. A lot of times I feel like that comparison falls short. In Infinity War, I think it was a pretty apt comparison.
Right.
But again, to hear more about our thoughts on that, check out that episode of the Force Perspective podcast.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's almost become a cliche at this point. Whenever you have a popular franchise with a sequel that's darker than usual, that has a darker than usual ending. Oh, it's the Empire of this franchise, and it's like you hear it all the time now.
Yeah, and they usually say it in a positive way because Empire is considered by a lot of the Star Wars geeks to be the best film in the entire franchise. We can get to that later on and see where we rank the film amongst the other. Where are we at now? Eight different Saga movies, not including Rogue One.
Right.
So 9 if you include Rogue One. But that's kind of a serendipitous tie-in. But really, the tie-in here is that it is as of this recording, we are recording this on Monday, April 30th. This Friday will be May the 4th, which is kind of the unofficial Star Wars Day for geeks around the world. May the 4th be with you. And it's also on May 21st is the anniversary of this film as well. The 38th anniversary, not a special anniversary, but that's when it came out, was on May 21st, 1980. And also May 25th is the long-awaited, highly anticipated Solo, A Star Wars Story. Maybe not so highly anticipated. But there's a lot of tie-ins going on with this episode this month.
Yeah. May was the Star Wars month for years until Force Awakens kind of shifted that to December. But it's kind of neat, even though the hype is not really there for me personally. It's kind of nice to see, a Star Wars movie Solo coming out in May, kind of, like you used to traditionally,
Yeah, and again, it's jury's out on that one. There's very little positive hype to it. It's been plagued with production problems. You and I talked about it on our summer preview Force Perspective episode, another cheap plug that will be coming out soon. But not a lot of positive anticipation for it. I'll probably still see it opening weekend because that's what we do, right? But it's just I might not go see it Thursday night. I might wait till like Sunday or something, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah, same.
It's just gonna be one of those things. But regardless, it is a Star Wars film, and this is again what many consider the best Star Wars film, The Empire Strikes Back, or later retitled Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. But Mark, when did you first experience Empire? I know we went over this last time. We talked about the original Star Wars from 1977, so I'm assuming it's more or less the same story because I'm sure you watched them back to back. But um, can you refresh our memories? When did you first experience Empire?
Okay, so like we talked about last time, I did not get into Star Wars until '97 when the special editions came out into theaters. My mother, after pretty much me begging her up and down, oh, I want to see Star Wars, I want to see Star Wars. She took me to see Star Wars, and it's because of her that I got to experience A New Hope for the first time. And after that, I was hooked. So I tried to get my hands on the other two movies at the time and be able to watch them, because she took me to see A New Hope, but she never took me to see Empire or Return of the Jedi in theaters when the special editions came out, which I believe was a couple months after. It was, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was January '97, I think, or maybe February '97 was A New Hope, and then like the next month was Empire, and then the following month again was Return of the Jedi. I never got to see those in theaters, but so I got to. I wanted to see the other movies still. So my cousin had the VHS tapes, the original VHS box sets. If you remember, the ones that have the Darth Vader head, the Stormtrooper head, and the Yoda head. Do you remember those tapes?
I do. I actually currently have them right now. They are after our Star Wars episode, we discussed them a little bit briefly, and I was like, I kind of want those because even though my VCR is kind of stored away, like in storage somewhere, I'm not going to bust it out and hook it up anytime soon. I was like, I still just kind of want them because it's just nice. They're just nice to have, and it has a good package. Even though it's a VHS package, it just looks nice. It's like a nice box. So I bought them off eBay for like $20, and they're currently sitting on my movie shelf on display. But yes, I do remember them.
Yeah, and I remember the promo too when those came out. They were like, "This is it's digitally remastered," and I think they said straight, this is going to be the last remastering of the original, films before the special editions. Like they made it a point to say that in the promo that this was the last, remastering of these films before the special editions came out and kind of tinkered with stuff.
Yeah,
so.
and technically the last release of the unaltered footage. I mean, there is those DVDs that came out in 2006, but those were more of a re-release of the Laserdisc. But these are like the last time they released the original footage. Again, they cleaned it up, like you said, but the same, no special edition, no nothing, same original cuts, everything. That was the last time they released it, and that was over 20 years ago.
But interestingly enough, I didn't have access to that set yet because after I saw A New Hope, I actually didn't realize my cousin had this box set until like maybe 6 months later, because when I actually got to go to his house and visit him. So next best thing, my friend from school, I was in third grade at the time, I believe, and my friend from school actually had a VHS copy of Return of the Jedi. So I actually saw Return of the Jedi before I saw Empire, and it became one of those things like, I would never get to see Empire for the longest time because I had no access to it. Like my friend had Jedi, so I watched Jedi, and he had A New Hope. For some reason, he didn't have Empire. I don't know what happened to his Empire tape. I can't remember that far back. I don't know if it was broken or if he just never got Empire, but I only had access to those two. Never had access to Empire until I realized that my cousin had that THX VHS, those versions, the ones with the big heads we were just talking about. And that's when I finally got to see Empire for the first time. And I don't remember much of my first viewing because I was so young. But I do remember getting the 2004 DVD sets. And I remember watching that DVD for the first time of Empire Strikes Back and just absolutely being floored by just what it was. Like I had already seen it up to that point, but I really didn't have a big memory of it. It was almost like, because I was so young, it was almost like I had watched it like on and off. Like I don't remember ever really sitting down for a full, start to finish screening of it. But when I bought the 2004 DVDs, that was like my earliest memory of sitting down and watching it from start to finish. And it lives up to the hype, man. Like everything about the movie, it's set up beautifully with A New Hope, and it just adds layers upon layers of depth to these characters. And the big, which we're gonna get to, the big shock ending that kind of floored everybody, just adds a nice touch to the story, adds a nice touch to the characters. And I remember sitting there just being, I had already known the twist at this point because it's become such part of pop culture lexicon, even though the quote that they use is wrong a lot of the time. But, we'll get to that later, I'm sure. It's just one of those movie moments that, we'll never forget. And, I've come to cherish that film ever since the last 10, 15 years that I've had that DVD set. Like I watched it to death, that 2004 disc until I got the Blu-ray, which was very recent. Like I never bought that Star Wars Blu-ray set that came out that had all 6 movies. I waited until the Steelbooks came out and I bought all of those, and which were pretty cheap. But now I'm watching that one. I watched that one when I did my recent viewing to prep. But that 2004 disc, like if I were to look at it right now, it's all scratched up underneath just from all the times I've been rewatching that movie because it really is a classic.
Yeah, it is. It is an absolute classic. I first experienced the movie, and again, I'm just gonna kind of go revisit how we talked about Star Wars last time. Star Wars first came out in 1977. I wasn't born yet. Empire came out May of 1980. I was born in June of 1980, so obviously I didn't see it in the theaters, or would have been too young. I would have been a baby to see it in theaters. So the first time I remember have a memory of seeing Star Wars in the theater was Return of the Jedi, and I think it was a re-release of Return of the Jedi because I don't think I would have remembered 1983. So it was probably like a 1984 release or something. But it wasn't until, later on, whenever they started playing them on TV, that I started kind of seeing them more often. And, I think the USA Network had them for a while, had rights to them for a while, at least in the 80s or 90s. I can't remember when it was. And then when I, again, kind of like you, but probably I think a little earlier than you, I really started rediscovering them whenever they started releasing them on VHS. So I know that they did initially release them when VHS first started, first became a thing. They released them in the 80s. But I first got the copies of them at those THX, remastered VHS copies that I now own again with the, like you said, the different faces on the covers. Those are the ones that I ended up getting, and those are the ones that I watched over and over and over again until like the tapes were out almost. So I would say, I had watched them a lot in like the 80s, but in bits and pieces. But it probably wasn't until 1995 that I became like hardcore obsessed with Star Wars as a young, a teenage nerd. So that was kind of my experience with it, and much like everyone else, I went to see the special editions and so on and so forth. But so that's kind of my experience with Star Wars, and it's been a long part of my childhood, and I'm hoping to kind of introduce it to my daughter as well. And she actually asks to watch them every now and then. She's like, "Can we watch Star Wars?" She has no idea what's going on, and I'll show her different pieces of different ones. I don't show her Empire because I don't want to reveal the ending to her. So I really just show her Star Wars and some of the prequel stuff, because the prequels, for all their faults, they are kind of kid friendly. So there's stuff like in there that she can like just watch and be kind of mesmerized by. But really, I kind of stick with A New Hope for the most part. So let's get into it. The movie was directed by Irvin Kershner, with a screenplay by Lee Brackett and Lawrence Kasdan, story by George Lucas, starring Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, Billy D. Williams, Anthony Daniels, David Prowse, James Earl Jones, Kenny Baker, Peter Mayhew, and Frank Oz, with music, of course, by John Williams. And it was released on May 21st, 1980. It was actually released a few days earlier in a premiere at, I think, like the NASA Space Museum or something like that in Washington, D.C. It's like a special release, but it released nationwide, or at least in wide release, on May 21st. So a little background. Star Wars, the first one, A New Hope, was an enormous success. George Lucas took the money he made from that, the profits he made from that, and he also took like $33 million in loans to finance the sequel because he wanted it to be independent of 20th Century Fox. So that's why for the longest time, 20th Century Fox always owned the original Star Wars, but not the Empire and Jedi because, they owned the distribution rights because it was with Empire that Lucas actually started producing it as on his own as a quote unquote independent filmmaker.
Yeah, that's always an interesting story to hear. And I remember, also full disclosure, another DVD that I wore out around this time was the Empire Dreams DVD that came with the 2004 DVD box set of the special editions. And one of my favorite sections was the story of Empire Strikes Back because, it was one of those things where like George Lucas had such a disdain for the Hollywood system that he always wanted to kind of produce these films independently. And with the success of A New Hope, he was able to do that, because as we talked about in that last episode, he kind of foresaw, how big merchandising was. And that's where a lot of his dough came was, in the licensing and, all the toys and all the T-shirts and all that stuff. And, he was able to use that success to be able to tell, Hollywood, hey, screw you guys, I'm going to release this on my own. But in the end, he did need 20th Century Fox to distribute it for him. But for the most part, he financed this all himself.
Right. Well, not by. I mean, he did it through loans as well. But yeah, he did it by himself. And it's funny to think that during the making of this, he was like practically broke because he's pouring all his money into this film, breaking the number one rule of Hollywood: don't spend your own money on a movie. But he was pouring his own money into this. Again, kind of going through all the merchandise money that he made and all the profits and royalties from the first film. So it's interesting that you think about it now that someone who George Lucas, who sold Lucasfilm, in what was it, 2011, 2012, to Disney for $4 billion in 1979, 1980, when this movie was kind of getting off the ground, he was practically broke. But, he was able to secure those loans because, all he had to do was go to banks and go, hey, I'm making a sequel to Star Wars, the biggest movie of all time. Want to give me some money? Of course they're going to give him money for that, right? Because they're going to make their money back in spades. But, it's just kind of odd to think of Lucas being pretty much dirt broke on when he was producing this film.
Yeah, and I mean, this guy at this time too, notwithstanding what was going on in his personal life, he was kind of really stretching himself thin here. He was kind of overseeing ILM, handling the financing of the film, so he really couldn't devote his 110% effort to directing, which is what he wanted to do initially. He wanted to direct Empire Strikes Back. So he actually reached out to one of his old professors, Irvin Kershner, and asked him if he wanted to direct the movie, which he initially turned down, if I remember correctly. And then it wasn't until, Kershner's agent told him, take the job, that he went back and told Lucas, yeah, I'll do it. So
yeah, Kershner, exactly. He turned it down, I think, because he said he didn't think he could live up to the quality of the first one, and of course his agent's like, "What, are you out of your mind?" Because that agent's like, all that agent's thinking of is that percentage that he's missing out on. Of course he wants to take the job, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so of course Irvin Kershner did famously take it, and it's funny that Empire is considered one of the greatest Star Wars films of all time. It's considered one of the greatest films of all time by a lot of people, and Kershner didn't exactly have like this stellar career. Like, I think the most high profile movie he did after this is RoboCop 2. He's not.
Yeah.
He's. And the thing is, when you watch this film, his direction isn't even that. It's not that spectacular. I'm not trying to besmirch him in any way. He was a perfectly fine craftsman, but you can't think of like he didn't have a visual style. He kind of fit into like what the rest of the Star Wars movies kind of fit into, right? He didn't really have his own unique brand of style. He's just there to kind of shepherd the movie into being,
Mm-hmm.
So it's just kind of interesting that here's a guy who's kind of just a craftsman. He wasn't really a well-known director. Like you said, he was a professor at film school, and he didn't have a lot of high-profile films under his belt. Ended up kind of directing one of what a lot of people consider the greatest Star Wars movie ever. But you're right. Lucas did not have the time to direct, and he gave the directing chores over to Kershner. He also gave over the screenwriting chores to Lee Brackett and Lawrence Kasdan. Now, Lucas did write an original draft, and then he kind of, when he was getting more busy, he did kind of turn over that draft over to these two. Lee Brackett first started the draft, but Lucas was disappointed in it. But before she could finish a new one, she had died of cancer, which is where Lawrence Kasdan came in. And it's interesting that the original draft, a lot of the same plot elements are in the final film with a couple of key differences. One of them is Luke's father, Anakin, appears throughout the film as a ghost, kind of in the way that Obi-Wan does. And the reveal of Darth Vader being his father is not in there either. So I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, I have a couple things to add, mainly from what I remember of the documentary, but we'll get to that once we get to the big to that big moment in the film.
Right. So it was on this film that Lucas started introducing the episode numbers. So in the first one, in the first original, now obviously today you can't see the 1977 Star Wars without seeing Episode 4, New Hope.
Right.
But it was with this film that he started putting in the episode numbers in it. And originally this was Episode 2 because he was not originally planning on going back and doing the story of Anakin Skywalker. So this was Episode 2, and then throughout the writing process, he started thinking about the backstory of Darth Vader, and then did want to go back and tell that story, and that's when he did change it to Episode 5. So originally it did, in 1980, it did come out as Episode 5. So I know sometimes Lucas likes to claim, it was all planned out. So this is one thing that leads credence to that. But as we'll discuss with some of the plot elements in here, especially with Luke and Leia, he certainly didn't have everything plotted out.
Yeah. And what's funny about that, too, is I remember watching A New Hope for the first time in the theaters and seeing the Episode 4 on the top. And then I remember, like I said, before I saw Empire, I saw Jedi, and then I saw Episode 6. So I still remember this, which is kind of odd. Like I forget half the stuff, during that time period from me. But this I remember. I remember maybe it might have been either after I saw A New Hope or either after I saw Return of the Jedi for the first time with my friend's VHS tape. I went to my mother and I said, "Mom, what happens in Episode 1?" And she's like, "I don't know. I'm not a Star Wars fan." So I actually thought there was an Episode 1 in existence at that point. Because what the hell did I know? I was just getting into Star Wars, and it wasn't until I like 95 that I realized, oh wait, there is no Episode 1. But where's Episode 1? Like, it didn't make any sense, So it was kind of wacky for me to discover it that way.
It's funny, you bring that up because that's when the special editions came out, that was like the early days of the internet, right? Like the internet was in existence. A geek culture was starting to build on the internet. And I remember that's whenever it was around then that they were talking about doing episodes 1, 2, and 3, like for real. Like they'd always been rumored. In comic book stores, geeks talking to each other, what happens in 1, 2, and 3? But it was actually around that time that it may have been announced or plot and started to be planned, episodes 1, 2, and 3. So I remember just there being a lot of speculation by the geeks online and I say comic book stores because I worked at a comic book store, so I just remember all the kind of comic book store conversations, which is a lost art nowadays. But it's. That I just remember I have fond memories of the speculation of what could they do with episode 1, 2, and 3, so yeah.
But people coming into the franchise with these special editions, like me included, we're seeing, episode 4, 5, and 6. You're like, well, where the hell is 1, 2, and 3? Just it didn't make sense.
Right. Because and even now to a novice, you have to explain. Well, okay, you don't want to start with 1, 2, and 3. You want to start with 4, 5, and 6, and then go back and watch 1, 2, and 3, and then you watch 7 and 8. But then there's also Rogue One, and then, it's so it gets it gets muddy whenever you try to explain to people now when they're not fans, But yeah, to me the proper order is 4, 5, and 6, and then 1, 2, and 3.
1, 2, and 3.
And now there is the other way that people go watch 4 and 5, then go back and watch 1, 2, and 3 for the backstory, and then watch the culmination in 6, which is fine. That's a fine way to watch it, I guess.
Yeah.
But as long as you watch 4 and 5 first, that's an absolute must.
Definitely.
But yeah, anyway, so. That's it was whenever he was kind of coming up with that backstory that he changed it to episode 5 instead of episode 2, which must have really messed people up in 1980 whenever they saw that.
damn right it did. Like 5, like this is the second movie. Like, well, what's this guy on?
I mean, I can only imagine him like on talk shows or something. Like, well, you see, this is the this is maybe the 5th episode of the Star Wars stories, even though it's only the 2nd film. And he sounds a lot like Kermit the Frog.
He does.
I mean, he really does. Let's see what else. But yeah, that's kind of the most of the backstory as far as it goes, unless you want to have anything else going into it.
Like I said, I do have the James Earl Jones little snippet that he talked about in the documentary about if you remember from that documentary, they interviewed James Earl Jones, and he said that, well, wait, I'm trying to remember exactly how it went. Maybe you could kind of fill in the holes for me in case I get the details wrong. But I think originally when they read the script, it said Obi-Wan killed your father. Right. That was the quote, right?
That's what everyone's script said, including Mark Hamill's.
Except for James Earl Jones's. Right. His is the only one that said, I am your father. And then James Earl Jones said, like, when I read that, I was like, no, he's lying, or something to that effect. Right? He thought like Darth Vader was lying to him. But every single script except for James Earl Jones said, Obi-Wan killed your father. That was going to be the big reveal. But no, it was hidden from everyone except for James Earl Jones, who had to actually read the line. And he said, I am your father. And he just couldn't believe it. Like, even he was marking out for that line, which is that's kind of a neat story.
It is a neat story. But no one ever knew that. Like, because even on the set, all the actors, when they got the script, it all said Obi-Wan killed your father. So Mark Hamill had that version. David Prowse had that version whenever he was on set filming as Darth Vader. And it wasn't until right before they shot the scene, because David Prowse only basically mimicked the movements, right? He did. I know he did speak out the words so that Mark Hamill and everyone else around him could react to them. But obviously they were always replaced by James Earl Jones' voice. So whenever he said out loud, Obi-Wan killed your father, but Mark Hamill, right before they shot that scene, Irvin Kershner took him to the side and said, actually, what he's really saying is, I am your father, and you have to react to that. So I think that's a cool little tidbit. And then I also was reading up on that. Hamill kept it secret until like the day of the movie premiere, and they said that even like the other actors, whenever the movie like played for the first time, and they were watching it at the premiere, the other actors found out at that moment too.
There's that there's that famous Simpsons clip, which one of the flashback episodes that they do, and Homer and Marge are coming out of The Empire Strikes Back, and I'm sure you've seen this clip. Yeah, he's walking with her, and he goes like, wow, what a movie. Who would have thought that Darth Vader was Luke Skywalker's father? He's walking past the people that hadn't seen it yet, and everybody's like, thanks, Mr. Blow the picture for me. I love that line because it was funny because I did the same thing when I was coming out of Infinity War, and I was like, oh, what a movie! Who would have thought blah 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 dies? Oh, and they're like, so I made that joke after Infinity War. So I mean, it's kind of timely too that we're doing Empire after that too, but it's kind of funny anyway. Yeah.
Spoiler alert: Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father in Infinity War too.
Yes. Spoiler for a 38-year-old movie. Yeah. There you go.
But anyway, But yeah, so that's a cool little tidbit. But let's get into like the movie itself. So the movie starts off. It's probably several years after the original film. Like you have the impression that the war's been going on for a couple of years. They don't really actually. I don't think they ever say like an actual timeline in the opening crawl. But you get it's been a while. Like they've been through some battles. They're all stationed on Hoth, which is the ice planet, and Princess Leia. Han and Luke Skywalker are out kind of looking for different probes and stuff like that before Luke is captured by a giant Wampa, which is basically a Yeti, an abominable snowman, who you never really see in the original cut. You don't actually see what he looks like. You get a brief instant of what he looks like. They cleaned that up in the special editions, but and then Han Solo has to go out and find him again, and that's whenever you kind of get the infamous and I thought they smelled bad on the outside. But right before that, before Han finds freezing Luke Skywalker, Luke is kind of stuck in a cave with this Wampa, and before he frees himself, his lightsaber is kind of out of hand's reach, and he decides to use the Force to kind of move it with his mind back into his hand and then free himself. Which here's the thing I wanted to get to. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that is the first time you see that specific ability to a Jedi in these films, because I don't think you see Obi-Wan do that in the first Star Wars film.
No, you're absolutely right. I think this technically, if you want to be technical about it, this is the second time that Luke has used the Force. The first time was during the Death Star trench run when he used the proton torpedoes.
Right.
And then this is the second time he uses the Force for something.
He uses the Force, but when he uses that, it's more like focus his mind and concentrate. But it's not necessarily to. I never took it to mean that he willed the torpedoes in there. I always took it to mean that he was using the Force to concentrate his efforts and be more focused. I think this is the first time I think they actually say, no, your mind can actually move objects.
Right, and that's kind of what I was getting to as well. Like the trench run was the first time he used the Force for anything, right? And then this is the second time, we see him use the Force, but this is the first time we actually see him like be able to move objects with it, right? And bring objects to him, which became the famous thing when I was in high school. My friend and I, we would always like go up to like our teachers in high school and just hold out our fists like we were trying to like use the Force to bring like a cup or a piece of paper to us, and we used to annoy the shit out of everybody. But that was like the first time you really saw that in a Star Wars movie.
It's funny too because it's with Star Wars, it's like the Jedi's powers like continue to like with each movie, like they get a new power. I feel like because then with like the prequels, like all of a sudden they get super speed, and they
become Mary Poppins too.
Apparently. Right? Yeah, exactly. Well. Don't start. In Return of the Jedi, the Emperor has lightning, which is more of a dark force power, but still a Sith power, if you will. But anyway, it's just amusing that like in each one, like they kind of add a new power to the as the need suits them for the story, I guess. So then after he frees himself, he does see the ghost of Obi-Wan. So we did kind of get the sense that Obi-Wan could kind of come back from the dead and talk to Luke in the original Star Wars when he talked to him about using the Force in the trench run. But this is the first time you kind of see him as like a quote unquote ghost, as he tells him to go to Yoda and go to Dagobah system to train under Master Yoda. And this is right whenever Han finds him.
Right. You will go to the Dagobah system. There you will learn from Yoda, the Jedi Master who instructed me.
That's not bad. That's not a bad Obi-Wan. And then we have
before this though, we get probably my favorite lineups at that point where Han Solo goes to find Luke and he can't find him. You're like, did the Commander Skywalker come in? And they can't find why don't you go find out? It's getting dark out there. And then they find out that Luke hadn't come back yet because the Wampa grabbed him and whatnot. So they try to tell him, don't go out there. It's getting, the temperature's dropping. You're like, yes, my friend's in it. I got to go out there and find them. Like, you're taunting him before you reach the second marker. Then I'll see you in hell. And then he rides off, bro. I love that line, bro, with the way Han Solo goes like, "I'll see you in hell,"
Yeah.
and then he goes off to find Luke. That's badass right there.
Yeah, it's a good, and this is a good movie for Han Solo. I think I think the three main characters, Han, Luke, and Leia, have some good development in this one. More Han and Luke than Leia. Leia does get some development, but I think it's really more Han and Luke. Han is developing into the hero. Like in the first one, he's more of the anti-hero that kind of has like the change of heart at the end. In this, he's like trying to. It's almost the reverse. Like he's the hero that's trying to like ignore his past and like stay a hero, but he keeps trying to get, because he needs to return that money back to Jabba. And the thing that I always kind of got on, and I still to this day I'm a little annoyed at Princess Leia. It's like he has to, like, he doesn't want to like be murdered, right? Like
Right.
He has to give the money to Jabba the Hutt. Like he can come back, you know what I mean? Like, what is she so upset about? Like, because I don't think he says he's not coming back. He just needs to pay off Jabba.
Exactly. And the way she kind of reacts to him leaving is, I don't blame him for kind of acting the way he did in a way, like, well, Your Highness, I guess this is it. Yes, it is. Oh, don't get all mush on me. So long, princess. And then they had that big confrontation in the hallway, which I mean, I love their entire, like, their scenes together are so awesome. They have such great chemistry, and just the way that it kind of builds
really
up to that big moment in the Millennium Falcon later on. That is just, it's perfectly built, starting with that moment, when he has to leave and they argue and whatnot, and just leading up to that point. It's great. It's just great writing,
Yeah, and it's sad because I was watching it today before we recorded it, and it was just like I was watching. I was like, oh man. Like, she was so great in this movie, and like it's made me miss her. It made me miss Carrie Fisher.
Yeah, really.
She's really good in this movie. But yeah, so and it's at this point like the three. Well, first we get the infamous moment where, again, we know, George Lucas may think that he had the whole Anakin storyline thought up ahead of time. Fine, I'll give him that. But he certainly didn't think that Luke and Leia were brother and sister ahead of time.
Nope.
Because, first of all, they kiss in Star Wars whenever she kisses him for good luck. And in this one, she plants one on him. She plants one on him long and deep in front of Han to make Han jealous. And she even does it at the end, too. Whenever he comes back inside from whenever she rescues him, right? So, yeah, George, I mean, come on. And the thing is, they even set it up later that there's another Jedi out there. So,
right.
Here's the thing about it. So, if at the end Yoda says, towards the very end, he says, no, there is another Jedi, right? So, Lucas knew, and his writers, Lawrence Kasdan, knew that there was going to be another Jedi that they were going to introduce in, or another hope, or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
So they either knew it was going to be Leia in 1980, or they didn't know. If they didn't know, then it like destroys his whole like I knew the whole story ahead of time thing. If he did know, like, why did you have them kiss earlier in the movie? You know what I mean?
Well, here's how I understood it, and here's how, like, from what I read a couple things recently to kind of shed light on this. And I think what the original intention was that at this time he had intended to do a sequel trilogy, and from what I understand, episodes 7, 8, and 9 at this point were gonna revolve around Luke's sister, who was unnamed at the time, but yes, she was going to be the other quote-unquote New Hope. But then by the time he was doing Return of the Jedi, that whole idea of doing the sequel trilogy was scrapped, and he ended up retconning Leia to the point where, like, now Leia was his sister. So I think at this point he was intending on doing a 7, 8, and 9 that revolved around Luke's sister. But then, what I understand, by the time Jedi rolled around, he had scrapped those plans, and he ended up retconning Leia because he had already set up, that there was another, like Yoda said, and he ended up retconning to the point where, like, he made Leia now the sister. That's what I read somewhere. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but that's what I read recently.
It would make sense. That's the best explanation for it, because otherwise he either knew what he was going to make her the sister and then had him commit incest anyway, or he didn't know and then retconned it, like you said. I mean, that makes the most sense to me.
Right.
So at this point, this is when we get like the splintering off of the characters. At this point, they don't see each other again until the next movie. Where
Which,
Luke and Leia do reunite, but they don't reunite
right.
with Han until the next movie. Where Han
Right.
and Leia go off of because the Empire is attacking and Darth Vader is coming down and attacking Hoth. So Han escapes in the Millennium Falcon with her and Chewie and C-3PO, and then Luke goes to the Dagobah system to find Yoda. So they this is the first time they kind of in the series that they kind of splinter off in their own different adventures. And the movie at this point kind of cuts back and forth between the two.
Right, right. So what this happens because of the Battle of Hoth. So the probe droids report back to the Empire that the rebels are hiding on Hoth. So they send down the AT-ATs, as people like to say, and I will never say AT-ATs. I'm just saying it to annoy people right now. The AT-ATs, well, the first appearance of the AT-ATs.
I call them AT-ATs, to be honest.
You call them AT-ATs?
I do call them AT-ATs.
I don't. There are people that get so mad when you say AT-ATs, though.
Whatever, they're AT-ATs. Come at me, nerds.
And but I mean, just that's when you think of Empire Strikes Back, you think of the AT-ATs, bro. Like that's like the lasting image of that film. Other than the I Am Your Father sequence, that's the image you think of when you think of this movie. It's the AT-ATs and the snow speeders, which is kind of cool. And the AT-ATs attack. The rebels pretty much get their ass beat here, and they have to evacuate Hoth. And yeah, they pretty much get decimated here at the beginning. So it's already looking grim for these guys.
Yeah, and this kind of sets the tone for the movie. The movie doesn't really get out of this kind of grim tone for the rest of it. I mean, you have lighthearted moments, but for the most part, it's grim from this point forward, and there's really no getting out of it. So a good portion of Han and Leia's story is basically hiding out from the Empire. They're hiding out in an asteroid field. They're trying to escape the Empire, and then meanwhile Luke is training with Yoda on Dagobah. At first you have Yoda being all goofy and silly, and then finally he reveals to Luke that he is actually the Jedi Master after Obi-Wan kind of interjects with his Force Ghost saying, "Was I any different when you trained me?" Yeah, this is whenever Luke kind of starts training and basically doing gymnastics. I mean, that's his training.
Yeah.
Is doing gymnastics in a swamp.
Yeah, like I cannot train him. The boy has no patience. He will learn patience.
There you go. You're gonna do,
That's a great
do all the
sequence.
Obi-Wan lines now.
Pretty much, right? So it's basically a lot of gymnastics, a lot of running around, carrying. That's where the famous scene of Luke carrying Yoda on his back comes from. He's running through the forest, the swamp, and he just kind of asks questions. Is the dark side stronger? Well, I mean, not necessarily stronger, but is it easier? Yes. And that's he's trying to explain to him that the light and the dark are pretty much equal, but the dark side is the quicker path. He was almost trying to imply it's like the lazier path. Like if you want ultimate power quick, that's what you do, but then you ruin yourself in the process. So he's kind of trying to get the philosophies of the Jedi versus the dark side, aka the Sith, which we don't know it's the Sith yet until the prequels, but. This is good stuff. He's training to become a Jedi. He's kind of being confronted with a lot of these, things that he foreshadows a lot of things that are going to happen down the line to him. Especially like my favorite scene from this whole, other than do or do not, there is no try, is that scene in the cave where he sees Darth Vader, and then when he cuts off the head and it turns out it's actually Luke's head. That's very we've seen it for the first time. It's very like you're confused, like. What the hell is this? And I was hoping, not to get on a tangent, that Last Jedi would do something like this with Rey, and they really didn't. But you see that scene in Empire, and it just kind of freaks you out. Like, holy crap! What does it all mean? But and it's a cool visual too.
Yeah, that moment certainly confuses little kids. Let me tell you, whenever I was a kid, I was like, "What? What is happening? What just happened? It's a robot with Luke's face? I don't understand." Obviously when you're older you get it, but like whenever you're younger, you're like, "Huh?" It's the whole middle section is very light on action and heavy on character development. Luke is learning about the ways of the Force from Yoda. Like you tell that you can see that he's impatient and he just wants to. it's really good writing because the whole thing about the dark side is that it's the quicker way to power, right?
Right.
And Luke shows himself to be impatient, and obviously it's a foreshadowing of a fact that he is the son of Vader, because Vader took the path to the dark side, and Luke is kind of showing those tendencies because he wants to be the best he can be right away. He's trying, and every time he tries to do something, he fails because he doesn't believe in, and Yoda has to kind of teach him that he has to have patience, and he has to, work at this, instead of just expecting things to happen. And this is where you get the do or do not, there is no try. This is where you get the adventure excitement. A Jedi needs not these things, right? This is where you get whenever, after Luke fails to take the X-Wing out of the swamp, and Yoda does it fairly easily, he goes, I don't believe it. And he goes, that is why you fail.
Why you fail.
This is all really good stuff that is really gets to the heart of Luke, and why he could be easily tempted to the dark side. And then on the other hand, you have Han and Leia's relationship building, and that whole storyline is basically Han, kind of in love with her, and he's trying to show her that he is without actually saying the words, and she's trying to deny that she's attracted to him, and she's trying to deny it, and this is a really good. I don't want to say it's a good love story without being like an overly sappy love story. You really only get one. You get two kiss scenes. The one when they're kind of on the Falcon and they're like trying to repair that thing, and C-3PO interrupts them, and but
they make a movie about C-3PO called Blocker.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other one, right before he gets frozen in carbonite, and we'll get to that famous line when we get there. But so it does a really good job of like showing that she sees the virtue in him, she sees the hero in him, but like she doesn't want to like admit that he's a good man, because he is such a scoundrel, and he also is trying to be tough, but like not admit that he has these tendencies either. So that's their storyline, and then they eventually escape the Empire. And head off to Cloud City, but not before being followed by Boba Fett, who has been hired by Vader to find Han Solo. They land on Cloud City, which is Bespin, which is run by Lando Calrissian, his old friend. And what I like is that we're gonna have a home movie where Han meets Lando, and it's coming out in a couple months. And, one thing I will say, Donald Glover looks the part. Better than Alden Ehrenreich looks like Harrison Ford. He looks the part. He kind of, from what I can tell in the trailer, he acts the part. So that's like the least of the worries I have with that. But it's also kind of like, did we need to see this backstory? Because you get everything you kind of need about what they're going to do, about their relationship in this film. Like, it's only a couple of lines of dialogue and their interaction with each other that kind of tell you, okay, they used to know each other whenever they were both kind of pirates, and they're both kind of scoundrels and not really trustworthy, but it's kind of like a brotherhood of bandits, a brotherhood of like honor among thieves kind of thing, right? So that's how they knew it. That's really all you need. Do we really need a whole movie exploring this?
We really don't. Yeah. I can put it as simply as that. We really don't, but we're getting one anyway.
Yeah, and this is where we learned that that Lando was the original owner of the Millennium Falcon, and Han won it off of him in a bet or a game or something.
I can't wait to see that scene. Because that's what I wanted. I want to see how the Millennium Falcon got to Han Solo. That's what I've been wanting for my entire life. Just see that scene. Hashtag sarcasm, in case that didn't come across.
Now, in the middle of all of this, we do get a scene where we do get, every time we cut back to the Empire. So I was saying that we cut back between Han and Leia and Luke, but we actually cut back to a third storyline, which is Darth Vader's kind of search to find Luke and Han, for that matter. And you would get different interludes of like different poor schmucks that would interrupt Vader and tell them their plans, and then they'd screw those plans up, and then he'd choke them to death. You get the really cool shot of like this is really good direction. This is really good shot, and I don't know if it was written in the script or directed on the set, but whenever you see the back of Vader's head, and you see it's all scarred, and you see the helmet
Yeah.
come down. That's a great shot, and I'm sure people in 1988 were flipping out because they're like, "Oh, we almost saw his face." You know what I mean? Like, because when I first saw it, I was like, "Oh my god, you almost see his face." So it's a pretty cool scene. But during all those different scenes, he kills different admirals, just keep screwing up. But you also get a pretty important scene where he goes to have like a little chat with the Emperor, which is the first time you see the Emperor in the movie, in the series. I think they mention him in Star Wars. I can't remember. Do they mention?
They mention him in A New Hope in that big that boardroom scene,
Right?
where that guy gets choked out.
Yes, but they never show him in there. This is the first
They
time
never
you
show
see him, and even then they eventually changed the scene.
Remember, like how will the Emperor can maintain control without the bureaucracy? The regional governors now have direct control over their territories.
Yes.
Fear will keep the systems in line.
That's right. They do say that. Man, you remember that line pretty good. So yeah, it's you have a moment where they're talking to each other, and without revealing who the father is, they go, "The son of Skywalker is dangerous. We need to kill him," basically. And Darth Vader's like, "If he can be turned, he could be a great ally." And the Emperor basically says, "Can you do it?" And he's like, "If I can't, he'll die."
Yep.
So you're watching it for the first time. You're like, okay, Vader's going to try to turn this guy. That's interesting. But then later you really find out he's trying to turn him because he knows it's his son. Now, when do you suppose he finds out that it's his son? I'm assuming after the original Death Star run, right? Because that he probably finds out, oh, there's a new hero, Luke Skywalker. And it's probably like, hey, that's my kid.
Yeah, he's
how
probably,
many other Skywalkers
he probably
could there be?
sensed it. Yeah, he probably sensed it for a while, especially after what happened with the Death Star. But I don't think it was. I always saw it as it wasn't confirmed to him. Like he's always suspected it, but he wasn't confirmed until the Emperor said he's the offspring of Anakin Skywalker. So that's when he heard that. That's when he was like, "Oh crap!" He is my son. But I felt like he suspected ever since the Death Star, the Battle of Yavin.
Right, and it's. Now, did they change any of the dialogue? Because I thought there's a point where, because I watched the original cut. I didn't watch the Blu-ray today. And in the original cut, they say it's the son of Skywalker. But I feel like there's a cut where he says something like, "How can it be?" or something like that.
That I don't remember because I pretty much only grew up with the special edition cuts that had Ian McDiarmid in it, and for the Clive, whatever the guy's name is, so I don't remember if there was another line like that.
I could have sworn there was a moment where, in that scene where Vader said, where like they redub it or something, where he says, where he mentions that it's the son of Skywalker, and he says, "How can that be?" or something like that. Yeah. I could have sworn he says that somewhere in some edition. They've come out with so many editions. I swear.
Or that could just be your headcanon. I don't know.
Maybe, but I feel like I've seen it. I don't know, man. I don't know. I feel like I've seen it somewhere. So anyway, this is so you find out that is his plot. He's trying to get Luke Skywalker over to the dark side. And in doing so, Boba Fett has tracked Han to Cloud City. He's informed the Empire, and then Lando basically lays a trap for Han because he's being basically blackmailed or threatened that if he doesn't, that he's going to take over, that the Empire is going to take over Cloud City. So Lando basically betrays Han, and Vader traps Han and Leia in an attempt to bait a trap for Luke Skywalker. Right,
and I love that scene where he lures them into the big banquet hall, and Vader's there. That's a big scene right there, especially if you're watching it for the first time. Like, oh my god, like there he is. Like, we'd be honored if you could join us, And then right after that, I believe that's the big that's the torture scene where like Han gets tortured. You don't even see like what happens to him. It's just like he's in some weird contraption, and all you just hear the screams. And then like Vader tells Boba Fett you can take a job with the Hutt, and then I forget exactly, and I just watched this. I can't remember. I can't believe I'm forgetting this already. But Lando saying so Leia and Chewbacca are gonna stay with me, and I forgot how the the rest of the conversation went. And it's funny because I just saw this and I can't remember it, but but I love how Vader ends the whole thing by saying, "Perhaps you feel you're being treated unfairly," and then Lando all of a sudden just backs off and like, "No, good. It'd be very unfortunate to have to leave a garrison here." That's all I remember because it's such an alpha line by Vader, but like he knows he has all the power over him right now. He has all the leverage. It's like you think you're being treated unfairly, like too bad. So, and then he alters the deal later. Which, by the way, kudos on that meme you sent me earlier about MoviePass, which is perfect, by the way. So I laughed my ass off at work when I saw that. But anyway,
yeah, pray I don't alter it any further. Okay, so I did Google while you were talking. And there is a difference. I knew it. All right. So in the original 1980 version, the Emperor says, "We have a new enemy, Luke Skywalker." Yes, my master. In the 1997 special edition, it is changed. He says, "We have a new enemy, the young rebel who destroyed the Death Star. I have no doubt this boy is the offspring of Anakin Skywalker." Darth Vader, "How is that possible? Emperor, search your feelings. You will know it to be true. He could destroy us." Then Darth Vader goes, "He is just a boy. Obi-Wan can no longer help him." And then the Emperor, "The Force is strong with him. The Son of Skywalker must not become a Jedi." And then after that point, it goes back to the original script. So they add like several new lines in the special editions. I knew there was something different because I only ever watch the original cut anymore. I don't ever watch the special editions. So I knew there was something different, and that's it. It's he goes, "How is it possible?" So that is whenever he finds out. I guess in the special edition, he finds out in that moment.
Really?
Yeah.
That's it. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. That makes sense. Okay, so they added that in the 97 special edition, right?
Yes.
They added. Okay, cool.
Yes. And again, I only ever watched the original cut, so I don't. That's why. But I knew I had heard that line before, and it was sticking with me really bad, and it was really pissing me off. Anyway, so basically, as you were pointing out, Vader is torturing Han with the intent, the express purpose of baiting Luke into a trap, knowing that Luke is Force sensitive and knowing that Luke is going to feel those emotions coming through. He's going to rush in to save his friends, and this is where we get more development for Luke, because Luke is trying to leave Yoda and Obi-Wan both knowing that rushing into a battle that he's not prepared to fight is dangerous. They both know that this could be a path to the dark side, because Vader, not only is he abandoning his training, but he's also going to someone who's very influential, like Darth Vader. Darth Vader could convince him to go to the dark side. They do know that he could reveal that he is his father, and then it could totally mess with him. So they are desperately trying to keep him from going. But of course, Luke takes the bait.
Of course, if you choose to face Darth Vader, you must do so alone. I cannot interfere. Why would you have learned? Save you again.
And then, of course, this is where we get the line as Luke flies off. No, that boy is our last hope. No, there is another. And there's something it's funny because I caught an editing mistake in this scene. Right, as he says, "I understand." He climbs up the X-wing to get on a ladder to go into the X-wing. And then the next shot of him, there's no ladder there. He just flies off.
Nice.
I don't know.
Didn't catch that this time.
I mean, I don't need to see what happened to the ladder. It's just funny. I just noticed there was no ladder anymore. It just disappeared.
Right. That's goofy. That's a goofy little editing mistake. But yeah, so he flies off, and then Obi-Wan says, "That boy's our last hope." No, there is another. And you kind of see the light of the X-wing kind of fade, and that's a great shot, by the way. Of Yoda.
It's a really good shot.
Yeah.
And can we talk about real quick before we move on? A good portion of this movie is Mark Hamill talking to a puppet, and it doesn't seem goofy. Like, it should seem goofy, right? It should seem dumb, but it doesn't for some reason.
Yeah, it's just I mean, props to the special effects department there to make it seem because
Stuart Freeborn who created Yoda.
Yes,
give him
and then
props.
Of course the great Frank Oz for voicing him,
right.
And
doing the puppeteering too.
Absolutely. And I mean, I never once thought it was a puppet. Like, I knew it was a puppet, but like when you watch it, the way it's filmed, the way like everything is everything is done, it's done so perfectly you can't even really tell. And I kind of just I love that throwback too in Last Jedi. You have Luke talking to a puppet here, and Luke talks to a puppet in 2017. So that was kind of neat that they did a little throw. That's probably my favorite part of Last Jedi, honestly, seeing Puppet Yoda come back. So
yeah, I love Puppet Yoda. Puppet Yoda looks so much better than CGI Yoda.
Yeah, and I hate even though Phantom Menace is what it is, but the thing that I hate the most about it is that they replaced Puppet Yoda there with CGI Yoda, and it pisses me off.
Well, in the original release, it was a Puppet Yoda. And in the Blu-rays and stuff, that's whenever they changed it to a CGI, and that's so dumb.
And I hated that so much because my original VHS of Phantom Menace has Puppet Yoda still. So
yeah, exactly, and it looks much better. It just does look. It
does, yeah.
And it gives the actors something physical to react to. You know what I mean? And I mean, nowadays, we talked about Infinity War a little earlier. They on that film they had, whenever there's any theme with Thanos in it, that was Josh Brolin on the set with a motion capture suit. Any scene with Rocket, it's I think it's James Gunn's brother, Sean Gunn, who portrays Rocket in a motion capture suit, and I believe. Another person does Groot in motion capture, and I believe all the actors who did who were Thanos' kind of henchmen, they were all physical actors in motion capture suits on the set. So it gives like people something to react to, right? Then when you watch the prequel trilogy and you see, for example, Obi-Wan fighting General Grievous in Episode 3. He can't it's like when he can't really react to anything because there's nothing there. There's a point where General Grievous takes out like 5 lightsabers or something, starts spinning them around, and Obi-Wan doesn't really his expression.
He no-sells it, yeah,
because he doesn't know what he's looking at. On the day of, Ewan McGregor was just looking at a green screen, right? Yeah. Like it helps to have something to act to, and Mark Hamill was there talking to Yoda, basically. I mean, it was a puppet. The Frank Oz was underneath on a stage, making the voice and doing the different the hand motions and everything. But it was something physical for him to act to, and I think that's and it's funny because and this kind of ties into a little bit here because Frank Oz kind of got his start on the Muppets. And if you ever hear actors talk about who work on like Muppet movies and stuff, they kind of always say it's really easy to get into the character because the puppeteers are so good at their jobs. They kind of think themselves like they trick themselves into thinking they're actually talking to like Kermit or they're actually talking to like Miss Piggy, because it's such a real physical thing. It's in front of them, and they have distinct personalities that they almost feel like they are talking to it like a talking frog. And I think that's kind of the same thing with Mark Hamill and Yoda here. Like Frank Oz is so good at his job, like Mark Hamill's able to react to this little green frog like it's real,
Yeah.
So moving on, this is where we get the famous carbonite sequence.
Yes.
Vader has decided that he wants to freeze Luke in carbonite, but he doesn't want it to. He doesn't know if it's going to kill him, so he's going to test it on Han Solo.
Test it on Captain Solo. He's no good to me dead. The Empire will compensate you if you die.
Oh, and that's another thing. One of the things that the Blu-rays messed up was that they changed the Boba Fett's voice to the dude who played Boba Fett.
So from Attack of the Clones. From Attack of the Clones. From your favorite Star Wars movie.
Ugh. Anyway. Yeah, anyway. So they tested on Solo, and right before, this is whenever Leia finally says, "I love you" to Han Solo, and he says, I know. And then, and which is the most badass line in the entire trilogy. It's the most like every guy wishes he had an I know moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's such a great way to go out on. And, of course they freeze him in carbonite, and they make a point to say that he's alive in there, but it still looks grim for Han. And, going to that scene, that was an ad-libbed line. I think this is kind of a famous story, but
yes.
They did not know how to do that scene. They kept, because originally scripted, he was supposed to say "I love you too,"
love you too,
and it just didn't work. There's no they couldn't make it work. And then finally, when they did one take, where I think Irvin Kershner said, "Just say whatever comes to mind. Don't think about it. Just say it." And Harrison Ford ad-libs the line, "I know," and then that's the take they used. So that you can credit Harrison Ford for that because that was his idea. So, and it makes total sense. That's exactly what Han Solo would say. And of course, they reversed this in Return of the Jedi, where he says, "I love you" to her, and Princess Leia goes, "I know," which was a cute moment, but not as effective as this one.
Right.
But yeah, that was the famous line. You know, again going back to Avengers: Infinity War, that was the one thing I kind of thought was a little off. Whenever Gamora says it to Peter, and Peter says it back, and I was like, it didn't feel right to me. I don't know.
It
felt like he should have had an "I know" moment, and he didn't.
Right. Like it felt like too, I guess, manufactured. I guess is what you're trying to say, right? It didn't really feel like it didn't feel real.
Yeah.
You know? But which I understand. I get it.
So after this point is when Luke arrives, and Lando, after all this, has decided to have a change of heart and decides he can't live under the Empire rule anyway. Betrays the Empire, saves Leia before Chewie kind of chokes him out a bit and makes him his bitch. But they end up escaping on the Millennium Falcon. But Luke then is kind of stuck in an epic battle with Darth Vader, and this, out of all 8 movies, this is my favorite lightsaber battle. Is the Luke and Darth Vader's lightsaber battle from this movie. I know that the ones from the prequels are fancier. They're much flashier. The original one from Star Wars, I mean, come on, it's not good. Like it introduced the concept of lightsabers, but I mean, you have 2 old men trying to do a lightsaber fight. It doesn't work.
The Force is with you, young Skywalker.
So this is my favorite. A very close second is the lightsaber battle from Return of the Jedi. And the reason both of those are in my top 2 is because they both have like a lot of drama and stakes behind them. And in this one, it's whenever, Luke confronting his fear for the first time and finding out that Vader is his father. And then in the second, in Return of the Jedi, it's him trying to redeem his father and being consumed by hate. So both of them have like dramatic stakes to them, but this one is my favorite. Even though it's not as flashy as the Phantom Menace one or the Revenge of the Sith one, it's still, there's more dramatic emphasis to this one.
And I love the background too, just the set design and the colors used. It just looks intense. The entire, especially in the carbon freezing chamber, like when they first start, it just looks awesome. Just the visual of it, like they're facing off for the first time, and just the background, like the actual setting they're in. It's just it has that really cool vibe to it. That just kind of sucks you in, like, whoa, it's about to go down.
Yeah, I love that whole kind of introduction. It's like, what do you say?
The Force is with you. The Force is with you, young Skywalker.
But you are not a Jedi.
You're not a Jedi yet.
Yes, exactly. Great. It's a great introduction to the two. They basically don't really talk much. They just have their fight until the end, whenever Vader finally cuts off his hand and then gives them the speech, which is at this point a very epic speech. And the reveal is we've already talked about where he says, "I am your father," and it's one of those things that I always. When I went into it, I already knew the end. I already knew the ending, and it still doesn't lessen the impact. I mean, of course, if I never would have known ahead of time, it would have been amazing to find out. But it's still a good reveal. It's still a very good reveal.
Right. So you're already getting to the big moment, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So they pretty much fight throughout Cloud City. They get out of the carbon freezing chamber. Vader thinks that he's got him already. He's like, he even taunts him to the point where he goes, perhaps, you're not as strong as the Emperor thought, and all too easy. And he switches on the freezing chamber, and Luke jumps out of it with the Force. And that's where I get one of my favorite lines: impressive, most impressive, which I love to use on different things, right? And then they pretty much get to that bridge area, and he cuts off his hand, bro. And that's when we get the big moment of this film.
Yeah, it is whenever he says, "Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father. He told me enough. He told me you'll kill him. No, I am your father." And that is the line, people. No, comma, I am your father. It's not Luke, I am your father.
I am your father.
It is one of the most misquoted lines ever. It's up there with "play it against Sam." That is never said. It's up there with "Hello, Clarice." That is never said. It's one of the most misquoted lines ever. It's so annoying when people say, "Luke, I am your father." It's like it makes my eye twitch. It's like, no, that's not the line.
Oh, and then just kind of seeing Luke react to that is amazing. Like Mark Hamill's an amazing job here, just reacting so perfectly to such horrible news. It's just like, and then when it hits him, it's just like it shatters his entire world. Like, no, Oh man, what a great moment, bro! Just one of the classic moments in cinema, not just in Star Wars, but just in all the movies, bro. Like for real.
Yeah, I love that. It's one of the best moments in cinema. You're right, absolutely. In that Oscars montage we talked about, last month or 2 months ago, it is in there as one of the moments, and it always sends chills up my spine. I love that moment, and it's a great payoff to that movie.
Now, what you need to do actually, and it's becoming I think everybody's doing it now. So you won't be a pioneer in this instance, but. When you first put this on for your daughter, you need to record her reaction to that scene.
Yes, because
everybody's doing it.
There's that one, the famous video of the one little kid that and he has the best look on his face whenever he finds out. It's so cute.
There's like hundreds of these videos now, of parents, recording their kids watching that scene for the first time and then reacting.
Yeah. Yeah,
there's some great ones. Though.
I'm gonna try. I hope it doesn't get ruined for her before she gets to it. Because the thing is, she's 3, so she's got the attention span to watch like a good chunk of a movie without like kind of moving around. Like I don't think she's at the point where she can like sit and watch a whole movie and understand every plot point. You know what I mean? Right. So I think she's got maybe 2 years before that happens. So we'll see.
Right. Yeah. But just an idea, for when you eventually show it to her.
So yeah, Luke instead of joining Vader, he escapes. He falls down this kind of air shaft, and then kind of almost falls out of the whole Cloud City. Calls out to Leia to help him. Leia comes back, convinces Lando to bring the ship back, and they rescue Luke. They escape from the Empire, and then the last scene in the film is basically Lando and Chewie going off to rescue Han. Luke getting his hand replaced by an electronic hand, and then that's it. The movie ends, and it's grim. Like Luke gets his hand chopped off. He finds out Vader's his father. Han is frozen in carbonite. The bad guys basically win, and basically the good guys don't do any damage to the bad guys here. All they do is escape a bad situation, and that's it. Like they don't get a victory here. And it's like in the I believe it's Clerks, in the Clerks, the first Clerks movie, where he goes, the whole movie's just a down ending, and that's what it is. It's a down ending. It's absolutely completely bitter. I mean, I don't even say it's bittersweet because I don't know if there's a sweet moment to it. It's bitter. It's a bitter ending.
Yeah, it kind of leaves you kind of hanging there. Big, kind of big cliffhanger. What happens to Han? Like, do they rescue him? Like, what's going on? And the whole movie, it's like you said perfectly just now. It's them just not winning. It's just them surviving. And yeah, there is a little bit of hope at the end because they live to fight another day. But they just got their asses kicked throughout this entire movie. Where like it is really looking grim for the rebels right now. And what a way to end the movie. I'm sure when it first came out, people were like, that's it. Like, I don't think endings like for franchises like this, I don't think an ending like this was done before. Like I could be wrong, like very wrong, but this is probably like the earliest instance where a franchise like this ended this way,
Well, it's interesting because the Star Wars movies were fashioned off of the old serials, which each serial at the very end of each chapter, it would end in a cliffhanger. But those were 15-minute stories, and the next chapter was a week later. So it was built into the formula that each chapter would have a cliffhanger. The difference here is that first of all, serials weren't a thing anymore, right?
Yeah.
This was a mega franchise, or the beginning of a franchise, because Star Wars was one film. This is the sequel. So this is where the franchise starts. It's the sequel, right? So you have a much anticipated sequel number two of a movie that only has two movies in it, and you end it with, okay, bye. Like, you just gonna have to find out what happens next time. Now, see, Avengers, and keep bringing it back because there are a lot of similarities to the Infinity War, which just came out. But that movie ends on a cliffhanger. But you're in a culture now in 2018 where you know there's going to be more Avengers movies. You know that they've had all these other plans, so Disney/Marvel Studios can go ahead and end on a cliffhanger because they know you're going to be back. They know you're not going to really turn the audience off because you know that you've trained the audience to come back to this movie. Whereas in 1980, that took some guts to do because there's only two movies in this franchise so far. Like, there's no guarantee there's going to be a third one yet, you know?
Right.
So, like, Star Wars, while being a big thing back then, it wasn't the monster it is now. It was just one successful movie at that point. It wasn't like, you know, and then you're ending the second movie on such a cliffhanger, you're really hedging your bets that they're going to come back for a third one. So that is very ballsy, I think.
Ballsy, yeah, absolutely. But it made for a great moment though at the end. You know, again, like we said, everything looks down. This is Act 2 of a 3-act play where like everything seems like, you know, everything seems like grim. Everything seems like, you know, despair. You know, how are they going to get out of this? And then the third act is when everything resolves itself. You know, but in order to get to Act 3, you have to get through Act 2, and you know, it kind of just sets that up perfectly at the end.
So I have something I found online during my research, which I think is very amusing. This is from the IO9 Gizmodo page, and it's an article called "How Fans Reacted to the Empire Strikes Back in 1980." And this is someone who went to the old magazine Starlog and found like the responses from the fans that had written into Starlog to the Empire Strikes Back. I'm going to read some of these. I think these are very amusing. This is from Robert L. Beatty Scarola, and he says, "Is Luke related to Vader? Most think so now that Vader came right out and said it. Well, I say, do you believe everything you hear? Vader may have just lied to enlist Luke to his side. Vader would then dispose of Luke once he got what he wanted." So this guy's in denial. This guy does not believe that Vader is his dad. You get this one. This is from Sean Bernard. I know they wanted to leave something to settle in the other sequel, but they left a little too much. For instance, Han Solo's predicament. This movie should not have ended until Han was either killed by Boba Fett or Jabba the Hutt or rescued by Lando Calrissian or Chewbacca. The former preferably. So they wanted Han to die. Interesting. Also, the fate of Bespin is not told. Was it taken by Lando's troops, taken by Imperial troops, or destroyed by Vader? I like Lando Calrissian, and Billy D. Williams was very good at playing the part. And this is the other one, the last one they printed here, and it was from Carol Kane. I don't think it's the same as the actress. Come on, Leia, why don't you take a look around? This is hilarious. Can't you see what Luke is up against? You could have a nice guy like him. Instead, you are turning your back on him. Forget that it was Luke that saved you from having your atoms scattered throughout the galaxy. Forget that it was Luke and not Han Solo that wanted to rescue the Death Star detention area. But you don't need to remember all that, Leia. As long as Hot Lips Han is around, who needs Luke anyway?
Those are great, man. That's awesome.
That was amusing. But that is from Starlog. You can find that on io9.gizmodo.com. I will link to that in the comments for the show. But yeah, that's Empire Strikes Back. Now, like we mentioned several times, it was re-released in 1987 as a special edition. There are a couple changes it made. Out of all the special editions, this is the least annoying one, I would have to say. Would you agree with that?
Let me see. Yeah. I think that, you know, seeing all the useless stuff they added to A New Hope, and then that Jedi rock song, which is annoying as hell, Return of the Jedi. Yeah, probably Empire Strikes Back was probably the one that they messed with. I'm not saying they didn't mess with it, but like the one where like what they messed with doesn't bother me as much, you know?
Yeah, so some of the stuff they added was they added the Wampa creature. They explicitly showed
which is
him.
Cool. I like that.
Yeah, which is a fine addition. I'm actually okay with that. They talked about it. you know, in the first one, in the first original cut, you only really just saw his head for like a second, and you saw like his arm after Luke cut it off. But in this, you actually see him in the cave, he's full bodied. You see him like eating some sort of creature, and then you see him kind of stalk Luke, and you see his reaction after he gets his arm cut off. It's a whole bunch of stuff. Let's see what else we got here, and then most of the other stuff is the stuff on Bespin. You just kind of, when you look through the window, you see more of Cloud City than you did in the original one. And like in the original one, you basically just see clouds. In this one, you see more of the city. And there's a little bit more like a new animated introduction as they're flying into the city, and that's pretty much it. There's not a lot of stuff that they changed, and then obviously they added those several lines to the Emperor Darth Vader scene that we talked about earlier. But that's it. This is the least annoying special edition, I think.
Yeah, and then of course they replaced Clive, whatever his name is. I'm sorry for forgetting his last name.
Let's look him up. Let's give him his due. Hold on.
Ian McDiarmid, bro.
Ian McDiarmid is the original. Sorry, the Emperor in Return of the Jedi, and then in the prequels, Clive Revel is
Revel. There you go. That's him.
Okay, hold on. Clive Revel originally portrayed the voice of the Emperor, while Marjorie Eaton portrayed the Emperor's physical form, filmed under heavy makeup, superimposed with chimpanzee eyes.
Well, there you go. I think I remember reading about that, but I completely forgot that was that's how they did it. Interesting.
Yeah. So there you go.
And then, like you said, they did replace the voice of Boba Fett with the dude from Attack of the Clones, which I like because it keeps everything consistent with the prequels. If they're supposed to matter, then I kind of like that.
I hate that because I like the original Jeremy Bulloch voice. So
Jeremy Bulloch, bro. Yeah.
And yeah, I get changing it to Ian McDiarmid later because he's in Return of the Jedi, but I just like films to just be consistent, or not to be consistent, but to be the original form, or at least give me the option to see the original form.
Right.
So let's talk about let's talk a little bit about its legacy. In the box office, it did gross $538 million. That's before inflation. After inflation, it is number 13 on the all-time box office records. The Academy Awards that year, it was nominated for it won Best Sound Mixing, which I was thinking to myself actually today that it really does have good sound mixing, because when you watch the Hoth sequence, it really is just models and like claymation things kind of running around, and it's really those. I mean, the sound of the AT-ATs like clunking along really gives you like the impression that they're physically there. So the sound mixing is really important. It won the Academy Award for that. It also won a Special Achievement Academy Award for Best Visual Effects, because that's one of the days when they didn't like. It was always a category, but some years there wasn't really anybody that was good, and they would just kind of give it to whoever the best one was, and that was Empire this year. John Williams was nominated for the score, didn't win, and the production design team was nominated as well, but they didn't win. It was also obviously continued the success of this movie, continued the franchise into Return of the Jedi and the prequels, and we all know the rest of the story there. It is available pretty much on all streaming platforms for rental and purchase, but only the special edition versions. Only I believe the Blu-ray versions are the ones that you can watch. It's also available on physical media on Blu-ray. But again, it's the altered versions. Now, we talked about this on the Star Wars episode, but we'll talk about it again here. There are ways to watch the original cuts. There are a couple different ways. One is the VHS that you mentioned earlier. If you still have a VCR, you can find the VHSs on eBay pretty cheap.
Yeah, they're like $12, maybe even cheaper than that. So they're pretty good
that way. The other one is the 1993 Laserdiscs, which I have as well. If you have a Laserdisc player, or if you don't, you can buy a Laserdisc pretty cheap on eBay. These Laserdisc collection is not cheap. It's actually pretty expensive because a lot of fans it's a pretty good collector's item. But the Laserdisc players are pretty inexpensive. You can get them on eBay for cheap. The 2006 or 2004 DVDs that have both the special editions and the unaltered theatrical cuts, those you can get on eBay, but you're going to be paying a lot of money for them because they are now considered collector's items. So if you have them, hold on to them. If not, if you really want them, you you're gonna have to pay for them.
What's funny is that that you brought that up. That's Empire's the only one that I own of that series that has the original unaltered and special edition, because it is my favorite Star Wars movie. So I said, you know what? I'll double dip, and I'll buy that because it does contain the original cut. My sister's favorite Star Wars movie is Return of the Jedi, so I actually bought her. I found that DVD copy that had the original Jedi plus the special edition at a FYE like years ago, and I gave that to her for her birthday. She still has not opened it. It still is original packaging. Like, she didn't want to open it because it's so rare now, and that one is worth a huge chunk of change. So I'm telling her, like, don't ever open that, because you could probably sell it one day for a good amount of money.
Yeah, if you have them, hold on to them.
Yeah,
especially if they're unopened. But I'm never going to sell mine. I pretty much own the entire trilogy on pretty much every form of media. I own it on Blu-ray, I own it on VHS, I own it on DVD, I own it on Laserdisc, I own it on digital. So I own it in every. They've gotten their money from me. And then finally, but yeah. Anyway, those are packaged with the original and the original cut and the special editions. The one thing we have to warn you about that, though, is if you do get them, they are non-anamorphic. So they don't, which means basically, if you don't know the lingo, it doesn't automatically fit to your widescreen. You're going to have to mess with the settings to make it fit to your widescreen. Because otherwise it's going to basically play like, if you don't mess with your settings, what basically is going to happen is you're going to get the widescreen version as if it was in a 4:3 TV. So in other words, not only will you get like the black bars on the top and the bottom, but you're also going to get black bars on the left and the right. So it's going to look like this widescreen kind of shrunk in the middle of your TV. So so what you have to do is mess with your video settings on your TV to make it kind of stretch out and fit. So it's not ideal, but you can. That is one way. That is the kind of the best legal way to watch it. Now, there is a less than legal way to watch a high definition version of the original cut, and that is the despecialized edition. So you can Google this by yourself, and it basically, there is a guy, his name is escaping me right now, but basically he was not satisfied with the Blu-ray editions that they released, 5, 6, 7 years ago, and he decided to work from the Laserdisc prints of the original trilogy and basically clean up every frame of the film and quote unquote re-release them as the quote unquote despecialized edition. So basically, high definition versions of the original cut without all the special edition stuff. This is not technically legal, so seek these out at your own discretion, risk, whatever word you want to use, but it is the only way to watch the original cut in high definition.
Right.
You can decide if you want to take that risk or not, but I will just say the despecialized editions on Google, and we'll leave it at that.
And we'll leave it at that. Yep.
So that's it. That's Empire Strikes Back. So you did mention this is your favorite Star Wars film.
Yes, it is. Yes,
yeah,
it is.
I would put this as my number one as well. I would put, in the grand scheme of it, I would put this as number one. Star Wars is number two. I put Jedi at 3. Force Awakens at 4. No, actually, I put Force Awakens at 3, and then Jedi is 4, and then I would put Last Jedi, and then I would put all the prequels. I'd put the prequels in 3, 1, and 2. 2 is dead last.
I haven't really thought about my list for a long time now. I know Empire's definitely number 1. A New Hope is 2. Jedi is 3. Probably Sith would be 4. Sith would be 4. Then probably Force Awakens. I don't know. I have a soft spot for Revenge of the Sith, even though we kind of tore it to shreds when we did Force Perspective a few years ago. But I have a soft spot for that film. I mean, I can't really explain why. I just do. It's just one of those things. So I would put it even above Force Awakens. So then it'd be Sith, Force Awakens, Last Jedi, Phantom Menace, and then Attack of the Clones. Yes, Phantom Menace above Attack of the Clones for me. So
yeah, that's how I have it too. I think the only difference in ours is that you put Force Awakens below Sith and Jedi, where I put Force Awakens before Jedi and Sith.
Ah. Got it.
So that's really kind of like it's basically Force Awakens is the only one that's different for us.
Yeah.
Although, no, because I put Last Jedi ahead of Revenge of the Sith as well. Because I really just dislike the prequels that much. But yeah, so that is our review of The Empire Strikes Back. We hope you enjoyed it. Now, it's time to bust out the random movie generator to decide what our next movie will be.
All right.
So
I love this part.
Let's bust it out here. Our next movie is not necessarily the opposite, but quite a different direction as far as what, last time we did Superman, this time we did Empire Strikes Back. So we're leaving the world of sci-fi fantasy. We're going back to the classic era of Hollywood.
Okay.
We're going to do our first silent film. It's going to be our first Charlie Chaplin film.
Yes.
And it is City Lights from 1931.
All right. That's awesome. I have the Criterion Blu-ray for that, so I'm glad. I'll be very happy to pop that back in and revisit it. That's going to be awesome.
Criterion Blu-ray. It is a beautiful Blu-ray for those who still collect physical media. We both think highly recommend the Criterion edition of this film. So if you want to watch it before we dive into it, which I always suggest people watch the movies before we talk about them.
And real quick, just fun fact before we even get into in that episode, but this is the first Chaplin movie I ever saw, so that's why I have a very soft spot for it.
I can't remember if it was this or the Gold Rush. I think it may have been the Gold Rush for me, and I think this is my second.
I just happened to see it was TCM. I can't remember what I was doing, but I was just scrolling through TV. And I saw TCM, like this, how City Lights was going to start. I was like, oh, I've heard a lot about this. I'll watch it. And it's the first Chaplin movie I ever saw. And then that's when I started watching the other ones after that.
Yeah, this is absolutely my favorite Chaplin movie, and it's probably in my top 20, maybe even top 10 of all time.
Well, see, right now, it's weird with me because it's like a three-way tie with Chaplin. It's between this one, Modern Times, and Great Dictator. That's like a three-way tie.
Those are all really good.
Yeah,
those are all really good. But anyway, City Lights, that is our next movie. So if we would suggest watching the Criterion version, either buying it or getting it at like your library or something, because it is a very, really, really nice edition.
Yes.
So before we go, a couple plugs. EssentialFilmsPodcast.com is the website. EssentialFilmsPodcast@gmail.com is the email. Like us on Facebook, please, at The Essential Films, and follow at Essential Films on Twitter, also at Adolfo_Acosta. Please like, rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please listen to us, our other show, Forced Perspective, which you can find at FP Movie Podcast on Twitter. Mark, can you go ahead and take the plugs for that?
Yeah, sure. So, like you just said, at FP Movie Podcast, follow Force Perspective on Twitter. We are posting. We posted the latest Force Perspective episode 110, where we do the spoiler review of Avengers: Infinity War. That's up on YouTube right now on Adolfo's channel. So definitely subscribe to his YouTube channel, Adolfo J. Acosta, and check out the latest Force Perspective episodes on there as well. For the WWE fans, I do the Planet Jobbers Wrestling podcast with my boy Denon. This past week we reviewed the greatest, or as I call it, the shittiest Royal Rumble ever. We will be previewing Backlash this week, as I will be attending Backlash. It's in the Prudential Center here in Newark, New Jersey this weekend, so I will be attending that. We'll be previewing that pay-per-view on its upcoming episode this weekend. So a lot to look forward to. And you can follow me also on Twitter at SportsGuy515. It's been on fire lately with different things, whether it's Michelle Pfeiffer controversies or Sasha Banks liking what I have to tweet about her. So it's a lot of cool things are happening there right now.
And if you want to know more about the Michelle Pfeiffer Scarface controversy that you're referencing here, check out Force Perspective 109.
Yes, we go into huge detail as to why my Twitter blew up that weekend of the Tribeca Film Festival when I attended the Scarface screening, and I'll let that story speak for itself. But a lot of content out there, so definitely check it all out, and thank you very much for checking us out.
All right, so that about do it for us this week. Thanks for listening, and remember, try not, do or do not. There is no try. See you next time.